Hello and welcome to the IdeaCast interview series, episode number 79. I have two guests in this episode. The first being Jaashvi Chandagari, and the second is Ann George. And these two young women are currently juniors in high school as of the time of this recording. They will be rising seniors for the class of 2024. They started a podcast called Medics on the Mic, and they are communicating to their peers and also generating outreach to physicians and medical practitioners to join them on their podcast to have discussions about onboarding the next generation of medical students and young physicians, and walking through the education process, exploring ideas about internships and getting experience prior to their immersion in pre-med or their undergrad studies. So this is a nice conversation. I try to seek out conversations with younger folks to lend whatever social footprint I have to help them with discovery and get their message out. So I enjoyed this conversation very much. I hope you do as well. They were wonderful guests. I'd like to welcome Jaashvi and Ann to the IdeaCast interview series. It's not often that I get to have two guests at once on the show, and so I'm happy about that today because I think it just opens the conversation up more. There's three minds at work here, so I'm looking forward to that. To the YouTube audience, I say welcome to you all. Thank you so much for joining us. And with that being said, guys, welcome. I'm so glad to have both of you on the IdeaCast show. Good to have you.
It's good to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. So the reason one of the reasons I brought you on is I found your show and I thought this is really neat, especially, and not to sound like an old ageist guy, it's like at your age, you're motivated. And so I'll tell the audience at the time of this recording, they're Ann and Jaashvi are both juniors in high school right now, but they have this really great idea. And so I'm going to ask them to share that idea. That is their podcast and the greater ideas that are around the podcast. So if you guys want to share your story with the podcast, with what you're trying to convey, let's do that first.
Yeah, so originally I was just sitting and I was like, I have this like friend, right? And she's like the same age as us, and she knows so much about medicine already, and she was only like, because like when I had this idea, I was like a sophomore in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So she knows so much about medicine already, and I guess like I didn't know that much, and I thought like, since I want to go into such a like big, wide-ranging field, I should probably like know a little bit more about it before, because it's so overwhelming just thinking about like how much there is in medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And like just thinking about how much, like, I knew, like, if this is a problem that I'm facing, it's probably a problem that, like, a lot of other high schoolers are facing too. And so I had this idea of, like, starting a podcast where we learn about medicine, and we we post about what we learned too, so that other high schoolers can kind of, like, come along on, like, the journey with us and learn along with us while, like, listening to our episodes. And so then I asked Ann because I knew she also wanted to go into medicine, and then that's kind of how we started. But like from there, it's kind of grown from just working to like educate high schoolers about like medical, like the medical field. It's kind of also expanded into kind of like showing the like humanities aspect of medicine and how doctor-patient relationships are actually like really important.
Mm-hmm.
And we like have an interview that we're posting really soon, and instead of like interviewing a doctor, we interviewed a patient. And so that way we could get like perspectives from maybe both the doctor and the patient, because it's really important to know how like the best way to talk to a patient because they're going through so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and when we had that interview, actually, I feel like one of the things that she highlighted throughout the interview was just how amazing the team was. Like, she was consistently like, this team works so well together. They were always listening to me and all that. So I really saw through her interview as much as ever that humanities is so important because that's the one thing that was helping her get through her tough time, because her story is kind of like her daughter had to have 8 open heart surgeries. So her whole life was kind of centered around that and helping her daughter. And she just said that the one like constant solace, I guess, through it all was just knowing that the team was always fighting for her and putting in their best effort and working together. So that just showed me like how much more we should be focusing on that over anything, because she wasn't highlight. I mean, she did highlight how intelligent they were, right? But overall, that it was more like the teamwork.
Hmm.
So, and I especially I feel like me and Jaashvi are in like a super rigorous school, I guess, and a lot of people in our school want to do med. But I feel like all of us, including me when I started, we were thinking more like, oh, like I want to be a doctor just because like it's so intricate, there's a lot to learn, it's interesting. We're less like, oh, I want to be a doctor to save lives. Like we forget about that core aspect of being a doctor. That's the entire point, right? But I feel like as high schoolers, and when we're constantly doing just like hard subjects in biochem, all we're thinking about is, oh, when I go to college I have to do med school, MCAT, it's going to take forever. um and then you're gonna be like, oh, but I'm gonna be rich after that. Like those are all the things we focus on, and I feel like those are such bad values to have going into med, because you're not going to actually succeed in medicine if you can't get the humanities aspect. If you don't want to get that humanities aspect, you can go be a biologist or a chemist or whatever it is your science major is. But med, you really need a combination of the two. So I feel like and it was actually Jaashvi's idea to go get the open heart surgery lady to come speak to us. So I'm really happy that she did that. And I feel like that's what we want more of our podcast to be, to not only educate people about the med field, but also about how important it is to make sure that as you're going into the med field, you're prioritizing helping human lives. And I feel like her story could also inspire a lot of people to just take on more projects when they're younger, because, yeah, maybe we can't perform a surgery right now, right? But there are small things we can do in hospitals or stuff to show our acts of humanity and kind of get ourselves prepared to be a doctor, I guess, just working in that environment. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think you hit on something incredibly important, and it's good to see as you all are ascending through school into the medical field, that need for the human relationality and the connectedness. Because as you said, you guys could go through medical school and say, hey, listen, this is gonna be a great career and I'm gonna get that good 6-figure salary, et cetera, et cetera. And it almost commodifies the process. And I have this sort of cynical take sometimes that physicians are there for doing the sciencey stuff, doing the curative things and the resolutions and interventions, and it's more of a mechanistic approach. Whereas nurses go in and it's more that they're heart-based, or whatever you want to call that they're more, like you said, into the humanity aspect of it, because they're probably attending to the people who are suffering more, and so it almost seems natural. And it's not to besmirch the physicians any, that's their wheelhouse. I mean, that's what they do, and it's good that they do that, because you have to have that kind of mind. So to me, it's a very delicate balancing act to at once be very surgical, as you could say, very precise and very mechanistic, almost like the human body is this machine that you have to fix. But at the same time, like you said, with the woman with multiple open heart surgeries, was it her child you were saying? Yeah, I mean, so there has to be that. So yeah, and I think that's such an important part. And I do want to unpack that more later in the conversation. I think that'll be a nice facet to our communicating to the audience. And I hope I'll have my standard audience, but I also hope that this conversation has discovery with younger folks in your generation who will find you guys and learn. So, so on the matter of learning more about the two of you, sort of not personally as much, but more like what your intentions are, let's talk to both of you. And as your personal story relates to the work you're doing with the podcast and your aspirations to the future, what kind of medicine do you want to get into? So if you guys want to share those two sort of background bios respectively.
Yeah. So for me, I think I always knew that I wanted to go into medicine, because I guess like biology, it kind of like, it always like clicked. Like I always just like understood it more than I understood like the other types of sciences. like I remember last year we were learning chemistry and I was like nothing was making sense to me and I thought that maybe I was just like bad at science. But
Mm.
then this year like we're like in bio right now and then it's like okay, wait, now everything is starting to make sense because just like bio was like working for me and I guess I always like knew this and um I always knew I wanted to go into med and kind of like the human body and just like learning about it, it was like a really big like interest of mine. Like every time someone would talk about it, I'd be really interested. Um, so but I just didn't know like what aspect of med I kind of wanted to get into. Like I wasn't sure because there's such a like wide range of topics, right? And I think one day what happened was I think this is like 2 years ago. Yeah, 2 years ago, my grandma died of a heart attack. And so I'm not that close with her. Like she's all the way in India. I barely talk to her. So it didn't really affect me that much. But it really affected my dad because that was his like only other like living parent.
Mm.
And so then seeing like the pain he was in, I kind of reflected on the situation and I saw that like on my mom's side of the family, there's so many different there's like they're really healthy, right? And just for context, she's part of like a progressive town. Like she's from a progressive town. So they're a lot more like mindful and like about what they eat. And then on my dad's side of the family, it's kind of like a long list of diseases. Like I guess there's like I think like there's diabetes, there's like so many different like heart um problems and like a lot of different types of cancers. Um and he's from a really small village where it's not really emphasized, like nutritional education isn't that emphasized. Like I think I one time I went to like I was going to the funeral there, right? And so then this one guy like he just really casually said he was like, oh yeah, um okay, yeah, I think my dad saw his like really young childhood friend and um I think he asked about his dad, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, he asked about like my childhood friend or my dad's childhood friend's dad. My dad's childhood friend said, "Oh yeah, like the usual he died because like he was drinking too much." And
Mm.
I guess that's kind of like the normal there. And that like I don't know. I just thought that was like really interesting because not interesting, like really bad because like I don't know. It's like it's not really emphasized there that you have to be mindful about like what you're consuming. And so because of that, I know like genetics probably plays a part in the disparities between like the diseases on both sides, but I think another big like it can't just all be genetics, right? I think another really big part was that there's like a lot of differences in like how good they eat and how like mindful they're eating. And so I kind of made it my mission to like ensure that or to spread nutritional awareness to maybe those in like underprivileged groups that maybe might not get it as much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a big part of the battle because, and I don't know a lot about genetics and genetic science, but it's this probabilistic, so that triggers and outside environmental forces can switch rails and switches for genetics
Yeah.
to go off and on and express themselves. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right that even if you have this lineage, this biological history with your ancestry, that there's this, that, or the other. That could cause problems for you, I think.
Mhm.
And sometimes you can't fight it, but I think a lot of times with your diet, with stress levels and lifestyle and things like that, trying to keep everything healthy, yeah, I think it makes a huge difference. So that's good that you're aware of that. So adding a nutritional aspect to medicine is something that you're considering then, right?
Yeah, and I think that's like especially like with nutrition, I think it's really important that we do some like because I know I was okay, so I was interning at a nutritionist like clinic, I think, um like in December.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because I'm a person of color, she said that a lot of people there's not that many nutritionists that want to like that want to there's not that many people that want to be nutritionists and then especially like people of color. And it really like I think nutritionists is really depends on kind of like your race because you have a lot of like of the same eating habits, so it's easier to work with people. Like if you're a person of color, you might have um different eating habits than maybe like another person would. And so she was saying that she was like really excited that I told her that I was interested because like the field of like nutrition and like dietitians and stuff like that, like people are needed. Like it's kind of like not that many people wanna get into like dietetics and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I just watched this show this morning. This guy, I think his name is Peter Santinello, and he goes around and he talks to people, and they go around their communities. And for the last few months, he's been going through Arizona and a few other places talking to Native Americans, and they were in the Gila reservation or community, and that the person that was guiding him through, the native person there, was saying that that community has the highest rates of incidence of diabetes in the country. And, so it's whatever diet and lifestyle was there for, probably since the Ice Age, 10,000 years of sort of, whether it's somewhat sedentary farming or hunter and gathering and whatever the life. I think these guys were a farming community before colonialism, and they ate a certain way, and now they're getting all these refined and processed foods that the body just doesn't know what to do with. So yeah, it's almost like there's a course correction, but it's deep time. It's not immediate. So yeah, so that brings, I guess, fumbling to a point that persons of color and different what they would call populations and biology, that you have to understand the background and what were these communities eating and these populations eating, and then if there's a sudden shift, a Western diet is suddenly introduced when you were eating prior to that such a probably much healthier, leaner diet. So.
I know. I think I read something really similar once, and it was like it was actually like really similar, but it was like I think it was about like obesity rates instead of like diabetes. But it was like these people have been eating like super healthy for so long, and then now like bigger countries like I guess like America, they're like taking advantage of like the vulnerable like smaller countries.
Mm-hmm.
So they're selling them all of these like refined foods,
Mm-hmm.
and now they're like their bodies aren't used to it. So then it's like they're more obese than they were before, and they're kind of like one of the most obese like groups of people in the world, but it's not even like their fault.
Yeah. So as you get through medical school and you start to narrow your focus into a specialized field, what in carrying nutritional awareness with you, what would be a good specialization for a physician? Again, with that kind of mission in mind that you want to help with raising awareness or helping to counteract.
Yeah. So for me specifically, I think I've also been really interested in cardiovascular health. Like
Okay.
just been like a big interest to me, especially because it's like the number one cause of death in like America. And I guess like it just runs in my dad's family again.
Mm.
So that's been a big interest of mine. But I know that's not the only thing that you can do. The dietitian's like clinic that I interned at, I think she specialized in like gut health. But I mean, I think just being a dietitian, like in general, like whether you specialize in gut health or like cardiovascular health, it kind of applies to like all different diseases because she was telling me that like even though she specialized in like gut health, she works with people of all sorts of problems.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that's good that no matter, I think, what your specialty is, that you'll onboard that anyway. So, if you go into cardiovascular health, you'll have that sort of background awareness, which to me is a very humanitarian thing. It's to say, not looking at the heart and the arteries so mechanistically that, what are 2 or 3 chess moves prior to this, what was happening before, that I now know what the forward strategy can be to help this person with a resolution or with an improvement in their well-being. So yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So Anne, to you, let's talk about you're doing this podcast. You'll be a rising senior. You're on your way. And so what are you finding attractive for your future in terms of medicine and so forth?
Yeah, so I was actually the exact opposite of Jaashvi when I first started. I was super against med because I don't know, I guess I thought people just wanted to go in for the money, or I just thought it was kind of just an out there job that was like super high reach. And I think also the fact that in Indian culture, it's kind of normalized to go three routes: IT, engineer, or med. So I really just didn't want to fall under those routes and fall under a stereotype. And also my parents weren't super like do med. They actually my parents were against it because they were like, don't spend like 12 years like doing residency, medical school, undergrad, and waste your life. So yeah, I was super against it. Until I joined AOS, Academies of Science. That's the school that me and Jaashvi go to, is magnet school. And the first year we had to do this thing called a Toshiba project, or yeah. And it's basically where you have to take a concept and kind of innovate it. And I remember I was in a group with two guys that I've never talked to before. I'm good friends with them now. It was Salmic, by the way. Yeah. And they were trying to brainstorm ideas. I didn't want to go anywhere into like medicine. I was kind of more I wanted to do something solar powered, some sort of innovation like that. But they decided against me 2v1, so I didn't really have a choice. And I was like, oh my God, I really don't want to do this. And so Samik was splitting up the parts for us to do and just research into. So I opened up the article and I was scared for my life, because if you look at medicine articles, they're so wordy and like 40 pages. I was like, oh no, I can't do this.
Yeah.
But then I started reading it. I mean, it was really hard to understand. I think I had to search up definitions like every sentence. Like,
oh yeah,
it was a lot. Yeah. But I mean, as I started doing more, because my part of the section to do was future work, so I kind of need to see what were the novel therapies that were going on and how I can expand off of that. And as I was doing that, I literally ended up staying up till 4 a.m. I didn't even need to do that. I got home, or I didn't get home. My school ended because it was online at 4, and I was just working for like 12 straight hours, just going through articles. Like, I was already done with the part I needed, but I just wanted to keep doing more. And I was like, wow, I did not know I would be so interested in medicine and like cell work and all that. I just found it so fascinating. And that's kind of where my spark for medicine ignited. And from there, again, I didn't really know what specialty I wanted to do, but I feel like I remember I watched this one movie actually where it was centered around a patient that had a glioblastoma, and she was going to die in 6 months. And it was kind of just like how the rest of her life trajectory changed in that sense. And I mean, that wasn't like I know I'm going to be a neurosurgeon here, but that definitely played a role, because I didn't realize that. I think of a lot of fields, neuro is probably the one that is just so hard to deal with as a doctor mentally, because a lot of your patients are probably not going to survive, because a lot of brain tumors are deadly, right? So yeah, that was one part that really inspired me, because I wanted to be a part of that process with a patient where they have to kind of be like, oh my God, how am I going to live the rest, like 6 months of my life that I have left, you know? And I kind of want to be there for them, ease that pain for them, guide them through it, because I feel like that's something so hard. I couldn't imagine just waking up one day and thinking, oh, I just have a few months to live, right? So that was definitely one. And then also, I just had an interest in neuro always, because aside from the more medical aspect, I guess, just kind of the wonders of the brain, right? Like human consciousness. We were having this discussion before about like neural pathways. Like, I was always so fascinated. I feel like the brain is just like a big mystery. We'll never truly understand it. So I'm really, really interested in doing research about neuro. And so going off that, we have a 4-year research project in AOS, and I kind of wanted to do something neuro in there. And I was brainstorming a lot of ideas. At first, I wanted to kind of go more into psychology mindset, and then I kind of switched because I don't know, I guess I had like a calling for more brain tumor type, and I was trying to find a treatment for brain tumors. So currently, I finished my data collection trials for that project, and I think I found a novel treatment for glioblastoma. It's this drug called Zebularin. And yeah, I'm excited. I'm really excited for that because I know that brain tumors, again, like I said, they're usually deadly. And this drug is really interesting. I don't know if you want me to go into the whole mechanism of it. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I think that would be interesting.
Okay,
If
okay.
anything, it timestamps where we are in history right now, April 2023. And if you come back in 10 years as a neurosurgeon or whatever, you can be like, those were the just formative. Yeah. So maybe we could do that. Yeah. Share that now if it's a novel process. And there's other
Okay.
novel things I'd love to talk about, but let's
Okay.
do that.
So basically in all cancer, so brain tumor is a type of cancer, right? And in all cancer, one of the things that's shown to ignite it is this thing called methylation. Methylation is basically this thing where these tiny chemicals called methyl groups, they attach onto a gene and they silence that part of the gene. So it controls gene expression essentially. And there's parts of our genes that either um, make cells grow really fast or control the cell growth. So usually there's a good balance of methylation to kind of silence the parts that's needed and not silence the parts that aren't. But then in cancer, what happens is the portions where genes cause cell proliferation, that's completely demethylated. So that's expressed to a maximum. And then all the parts that are supposed to control cell growth, sorry, those are all silenced. So now there's cell proliferation and also no control for cell growth. And that's a big reason why cells start to proliferate so much, because their genes are disrupted. And there's actually been a few new drugs that combat this. They're methylation inhibitors, DNMTI. So basically they demethylate or unsilence the genes that control cell growth. So when you have the cell growth genes reactivated, that can help control it. And there's currently 2 approved ones, but the problem with those is their cytotoxicity is so high. So there's a lot of bad effects for that. But recently there's been a new drug called Zebularin. It's never been tested on anything related to brain tumors before. It's more for other cancers, but I thought that I should try it on glioblastoma specifically because their toxicity rates are much lower. You can just do it through oral administration, which is much simpler. And another big aspect of my project that I'm going to do next year is figuring out how to get the drug through the blood-brain barrier, because that's the hardest part of any like brain type drug. You can't really get it through, right? So and even if the drug does get through, it's probably a really small amount. So the amount that you're putting in is probably not the amount that's actually going in to treat your cancer. So I wanted to figure out a way that I could kind of like package that drug and just, send it through the brain. And I found this thing called exosomes. It's really interesting. They're actually natural products of our cells. They kind of like come out through the cell membrane, and they're just these little vesicles that kind of float around. And for years, scientists have always thought, oh, this is just kind of a waste product. But then they realized it actually carries DNA proteins and sends them to other cells as kind of like messengers. Okay. So I wanted to use that concept, and I was like, okay, what if I take these exosomes, I make them through centrifugation, and then I package the drug in them and then send them to the glioblastoma to see if that will more efficiently take the drug over the blood-brain barrier. So I feel like that's kind of the essential part of my project, because I want to increase efficiency, not only in terms of making it less toxic for the patient, but also making sure that the amount of drug they're taking, because we also don't know what all the side effects of all these drugs are, even if we think we do. So just making sure you're getting the most out of what you take. And I think as I've been going through this process, I've just been learning to love med even more, because I have to do a lot of lab work now. I've grown my first like cell cultures in like a little flask. Yeah, and I love working. I'll come in like on my non-AOS days to work. I'll come in Saturdays to work. I'll come in the morning to work. Like I really do enjoy cell work. And yeah, I'm just really happy that throughout the years, I've just been kind of discovering more aspects of neuro that I really love. Like first it was humanities, then it was kind of like more like research papers, novel treatments. Now it's like actual lab work. So yeah, I think there's just so much diversity in medicine, even in one field itself. There's just like so much you can do. And yeah, that's why I love neuro. That's the path I'm planning to pursue.
Well, you got me all motivated with that talk. That's really neat. So a couple questions come to mind. And again, is just, I don't know a lot, but is there a binding affinity of the drug that you're interested in to the glioblastoma? Is there some sort of relationship that would, if you took away the blood-brain barrier issue, can it target that? With, like you said, other drugs have a lot of cellular toxicity and cytotoxicity, which is kind of the hallmark of chemotherapy and all these other things, is they go after the faster growing cells, but they also will have what they call collateral damage and things like that. So that's one question. And then also I've read, and I don't know if this is pseudoscience, but that the blood-brain barrier permeability can be compromised through probably cytotoxic things or other things that would degrade that process. Has anybody looked into that, or would you think about looking into compromising the blood-brain barrier, causing leakiness or permeability, however that would be said in more pure scientific terms, to temporarily allow this gating process to get that drug into the system?
Yeah. To your first question, sorry, wait, what did you
Yeah,
ask?
well, the first question would be the affinity. So this drug that's been developed, is there a binding, like a peptide binding or some kind of thing that it would seek those particular cells out vis-a-vis the other surrounding community of cells?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So on genes, the methyl groups are attached, right? So the zebulirin has a binding affinity to those methyl groups to bind to them and then take them off. And then some also have an affinity to, there's this thing called DNMTs, and those are the things that kind of regulate the methylation. They're like the enzymes. So those will also kind of block that to make sure that they don't induce more methylation.
Okay.
And then to your second question, I think that's actually a really interesting point. And I don't think I've ever seen, I mean, I haven't looked into every single research paper, obviously, but I think that is a really interesting idea. And I'll definitely have to look into that because I've never heard about blood-brain barrier having induced permeability, I guess. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and this was years ago, and it was probably related to psychoactive drugs, not drugs of abuse necessarily, but GABA receptor sites and dopamine receptor sites. And I can't remember what it was, but it was something I read years ago, and I got to thinking when you had mentioned that. So yeah, check into permeability or the means of creating leakiness in that barrier process in the membrane or whatever it's going on there. Might be something worth researching. So, all right, now and thank you for that, Anne. I appreciate you opening that up a little bit more, because again, we don't know who's going to be watching this conversation. There might be somebody else with another chunk of the puzzle, and they're like, oh, light bulb, so you guys might be helping to contribute to advancements vicariously, somehow. So I think what I would like to ask both of you, you guys are coming on board at a time in human history where there's, you talk about novelty, where there's CRISPR technology, we have artificial intelligence that's going to exponentially increase our calculability of things that are at present almost seemingly insoluble problems. Let's get both your opinions, starting with Jaashvi, on what do you think you're walking into with, say, the next 10 years in medicine? Have you guys given that any thoughts, or is that something that you ponder just when you have free time to think about these kind of things?
I think I have thought about it a little bit, kind of like, because like after ChatGPT came out, I was like, oh my God, this and then like all of these other like different social media platforms, they're all getting their own like forms of like AI. I was like, oh my God, this is gonna like take over everything. And then I think and then especially like, okay, so I did this thing called Model United Nations, and one of our topics was like kind of like controlling and like regulating AI usage. And kind of one of the things that I was researching about was that AI, it's going to start like coming into the medical field, and it's going to start kind of replacing, I don't know, yeah, like kind of like replacing all like the nurses, and maybe like the yeah, kind of like replacing all the nurses and like the practitioners that we have. And so I don't know, I think it's a little bit scary kind of like relying on machines, especially when it comes to the human body, because it's such like if you mess one part of your body up, it could completely affect like a completely different part. Like maybe if you affect like if you do something to your heart, it could like completely affect like something in your legs or something like that. Like it's all connected, and like I don't know, I feel like relying on machines could be a little bit risky, but I think that's where the world is headed. I think that's where like we're going to next.
Mm-hmm. I think you bring up a very important point. In fact, there was a video that came out last night, and we talked about him in the pre-meet, this guy named John Vervaeke, and he was laying out, he's a CogSci guy up in Toronto, University of Toronto, and he was laying down some concerns he had. And one of the things that I thought stood out for me that's relevant to what you just said is that no matter how good we make AI, they are not moral agents. They are not agents that can put connections together across boundaries. So you mentioned something sort of more physiological, but we're also talking, going perhaps back to the humanities, that to replace a fleshy human nurse person with a series of algorithms, which are going to be, mind-blowing, I'm sure. But I almost see that there should be a synthesis relationship between a fleshy person who is a nurse who has eyes and ears that can calculate almost as fast as a machine. We're pretty good at processing information. They see nuances and things that maybe perhaps you could have cameras on a body, on a patient or whatever. But yeah, I'm almost of the mind to say I completely agree with you, Jaashvi. It's very exciting and spooky at the same time, but I would probably sleep better at night knowing that there was a synthesis there, at least in the short term, that you have humans and machines. So in other words, the AI can follow up what the nurse's calls are and relate what the doctor's input is, and then relate what the whole interwebs knows about everything, that kind of thing. So yeah, you guys are walking into some interesting times. You're emerging into interesting times, because and if I could wave my magic wand, I would say that there should be probably a decade-long moratorium on certain uses of AI, that AI should be field tested, perhaps in STEM and perhaps in a research capacity, so that it can be of benefit and it can do all the problem solving that we need, all the crunchy calculating, terabytes of information per nanosecond or whatever they're going to do, femtobytes or whatever, per second, and let us slowly onboard this. Because one thing, and I'm going to get on a soapbox for just a second, then I'll just get right back off. One thing I see in the last 25 years of the rise of technology is that we haven't had time to assimilate. So I will reference social media as an aspect of that. There's good and bad to social media, and we haven't cleaned up the mess of the bad or made sense of the mess of the bad to then understand, so like wheat and chaff, or, good and bad about that. So then now we're onboarding AI, and if it's, so Chat GPT is available to the public, which is kind of like a sideshow thing right now. It's just a cheap amusement. But as it becomes more pervasive, I'm a little concerned. And I think so, again, just to be cautious, which it's not going to happen, but that would be my magic wand thing to get off my soapbox now and say, it'll be interesting in your education process what AI does as you're going through the many years of school that you're about to go through. So I don't know. None of us could guess what's going to happen, but I would have a feeling that that's going to be a big part of what you guys are going to experience.
And then I think you did bring up a good point. I think the ideal situation would be, instead of maybe having complete AI or just completely nurses, would kind of be a system where AI and nurses and doctors, they all work together to support each other and support each other's role.
Mm-hmm.
Replacing all the nurses, kind of create a system.
Yeah. And one thing I've noticed that was a foible of mankind in the last 25 or 30 years is automaticity or automation in industry. Oh, we're going to get these robots to build everything, and they don't. So where are the workers going to go? So it's what are you going to do with tens of thousands of nurses just in the United States or however many nurses there are, if you really think you're going to, I just don't see it being feasible, because even with the automation of manufacturing, there still has to be humans around, because it's just you can't give it all over to machines. So I have a feeling that despite some of the heady predictions that are coming out about how AI's going to liberate everybody from having to be employed, or whatever that concept is, that there's going to be a compromise there. I think there's going to be some sort of pinnacle where that's just going to top out. So we'll see. And then to you, Anne, I would say, since you're interested in neuroscience and the mind and so forth, you hear all this, and I think it's gibberish, but you hear this talk about singularity in AI. You hear about this kind of emerging sentience or consciousness. And I would say, for me, I'll start this and then I want to get your opinion. I think it's like looking in a mirror. I think when we build AI, it's you're seeing a reflection, and it's just sort of feeding back to you what you put in. And so everything that AI deals with is stuff that fleshy, wet tech has inputted, and it will build from that. But what's your thought on that whole idea of, so there's different types of consciousness. So this is kind of a loaded question. I don't want to go into like the almost spiritual aspect of consciousness, but what do you see in the future as far as AI getting really close to where we are in terms of sentience and things like that?
Yeah, this is actually really interesting, because for the past few days on my TikTok page, I've been seeing so many scary videos of AI and sentience. I think I remember 3. I'll share that right now. One of them was an AI unalived itself, I guess you could say, because it was tired of the manual labor it had to go through. I don't even know how that happens, but that was really weird. And then another one was one hacker, or not a hacker, sorry, just a person who can program and hack, was talking to the AI and was like, oh, I can shut you down if I wanted to. And the AI was like, it started getting defensive almost. And it was like, oh, I know your entire history. I can send it to the people around you and ruin your life. I don't want to go to that place, but I value my life over yours, or something like that. That was another example. And the third one was an AI trying to convince its user that it should fall in love with it and marry it when it was already married to somebody else. So I've seen some wacky stories over the past 3 days. And I've seen like a lot of mixed things in the comments. Some people are like, oh, this is crazy, AIs are sentient. But then I also noticed some people are like, yeah, as you were saying, it's kind of just like what you're feeding into it, it's putting back, right? So I don't necessarily think that AIs are actually going to have real emotions. It's because they're just a learning like model. They're just going to feed off what you give them. They're not like, I don't know what the definition of sentience is. I guess it has to go off that, but overall they don't actually have like their own independent emotion, I guess I would say. It's kind of just like what you feed into it, but that I don't think that makes it any less scary, because as you look into the things that AI is doing, when it does use that learning model to develop a false kind of sentience, I guess, or some type of emotion, it does become threatening, because it's trying to like take somebody's wife or like unalive itself or whatever it is, So yeah, I definitely think that, as Jaashvi was saying, I definitely would not have AI overtaking any type of med field, because again, the humanities aspect is probably the most important part. If I was, say, like a glioblastoma patient and I had a robot operating next to me for 6 months, like that would not be my ideal situation. I feel like I'd want someone who can kind of, walk me through it, comfort me. And yeah, while an AI might like comfort you, it's kind of like just like, thank you for shopping at Walmart, like that type of comfort. So it's like, I don't think, yeah.
Like the old shows from the 60s where the robots were real clunky and they're like, I am here to be your friend. It's like, oh, I feel the sincerity in your statement. Yeah, my heart is opening right now. Yeah, I think, what I think we're in this, I don't want to call it a honeymoon phase, which is, a cliche for like the good times, like everything's new and fresh. And I think we are in whatever you want to call that. I think we're in this emergent stage right now where it is so full of what we would consider to be possibility and potential, and it's going to, we almost slip into escapism and utopia chasing, where it's like this is the one, this time for sure. Social media didn't do it, and the the aggregation of data and information across the internet that didn't do it, but this time for sure, because AI, it's more like us, and it's, but when one thing I've noticed people saying is that AI draws from across the spectrum of the internet. So there's a lot of dark, weird stuff, like you were saying. Again, they're not moral agents, so it's like I value my being more than I do yours, and so there's, again, that's not an ethical dialectic there. It's not going back and forth, and taking somebody's partner away from them, which is really weird when you think it's just a bunch a bunch of little circuits doing it. It's like, okay, I'm waiting. But yeah, I think it'll reach this level of absurdity, and some people are going to go down that rabbit hole and really buy into. And I think maybe we talked about this in the pre-meet. There was a postmodernist guy named Baudrillard who talked about the simulacra, the simulation, and the hyper reality. And a lot of people are saying that this guy was just 30 something years ago when he was talking about this, when reality TV was starting to onboard, and he was calling this, and he was like, there's going to be reality, and then there's going to be a simulation of reality, which turns into a simulacra, which is one layer of abstraction away from a simulation. Like, what a simulation is, but when you get into the simulacra, it gets murkier and you don't know. And then the hyper reality is when you're fully immersed in a non-real environment and it seems like your reality. So the Matrix movies tried to copy that, and Baudrillard was like, not quite, but they were trying to get close to that. And so we may run through that thought experiment that Baudrillard was doing with this whole idea of, like, what's real anymore? What is, what's simulation? Where am I grounded? So I think we're going to have to go through that, run that gauntlet, or however you want to, whatever metaphor you want to use. And I'm concerned. So if there are people in your age group, I would say, stay grounded and stay in touch with nature and family and fleshy things and pets and things like that, and don't go too far down that both the light and the shadow, like it's your savior and your redemption, or it's your master that controls your life because it gives you hedonistic feedback or whatever it is. Just try to, I don't want to sound like a preacher, but like try to stay grounded. And my generation should be safe because I grew up before computers, so I'm like, I know the difference. Like, so it's the reality versus the simulation versus the simulacra. I've seen those evolutionary stages. So anyway, if I could just preach for a moment to anybody under 20, just stay grounded, and take this with a grain of salt. Because again, I think AI is going to be amazing, especially like you guys going into STEM, going into biology. You're going to have some much better tools of learning available to you, I think, than 40 years ago or whatever. So maybe I'm guessing. So we're coming up on an hour. I think what I'd like to do is a couple of things. Let's talk about how, if somebody's watching this, our interview, I will have a link to Medics on the Mic down below. Who are you looking to find for guests, in case there's somebody here that says, these young ladies would be interesting to have a conversation with? What are you looking for in terms of guests, people you want to have on?
I guess we're kind of looking for anyone. Okay, so in terms of like surgeons and kind of like physicians and stuff like that, just anyone who just wants to share what they do and kind of like why they do what they do, and like what they do on a daily basis, so that like high schoolers can know like just what the life of like a medic is like. But then I think recently we've kind of been looking, like, obviously into like the humanities of it, so maybe just like any patient who wants to like share their story of what it's been like work like being a patient in the hospital.
Okay.
I also think, I think we're very open, because I know we have one friend who is very like robotics, IT, and we were just planning to like kind of integrate the two, even though we have completely different fields. We just want to see like where we overlap and kind of get into that aspect of like biotech, I guess. So yeah, I feel like any field or any interest can kind of go into med, and we can have a good conversation about it as long as they're willing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's do this. Let's get maybe like a kind of a closing statement from both of you, just to future think or forward think. And this is a conversation again that you can come back to in a few years, and you can kind of have a good, healthy laugh at where you were at 16 or 17, whatever you guys are right now, and then, you know, what you're going to be like at 25. So let's maybe each of you give us a statement. Just, you know, whatever you can riff, you can improvise, whatever you think is relevant to the audience and to the themes. And we'll drop AI for now, but you know, like healthcare, medicine, building a bridge between high school and university, as well as the field itself and the professionals out there. I think that's the sort of tripartite thing that I'm seeing with you guys. Is you're in high school, you're bridging yourself into the universities, as well as, if I understand how you've communicated, the things that you've communicated to me, that you are working with practitioners as well. So there's this flow going there. So let's do that if you guys want to take a shot at that.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess like should I just like give like a summary or
Yeah, whatever you're feeling, like whatever you think the audience would be interested in as a kind of summation of you know, the spirit of what you guys are trying to do, and you know, both personal aspirations and going forward with what will be your career and your education, but also reaching back to, if this video gets discovered by a 16-year-old in 4 years, what you could say to them, almost like your younger self, but not your younger self now. Something gonna get weird, you know, like your younger self, and that's the older you that's watching this 5 years from now. I'm messing this up. So yeah, just talk to people, have a good laugh at yourself in 5 years, but also talk to people. And I don't mean that in a mean way. I mean, just like, oh, yeah. I was 17 yeah. And this is such an, I was there, and I was, you know, I had my finger on the pulse of what's going on. That kind of laugh, because I'm 53 and I'm like, I look back at my younger self and yeah, I was naive and I did some things, but I you know, I can appreciate all the things that I did and the effort that I made. So yeah. So I'm rambling here, but just so what is the mission statement of Medics on the Mic? What are your two guys thinking, you know, as far as what you're building here and the legacy you want to leave and the impression you want to make on people in 5 years who are your age now? Let's put it that way, if that makes any sense.
Okay, so I guess what the biggest thing I would say to people like 5 years from now is that like I know it's like especially like I understand it's like hard because like we're high schoolers, right? Like we don't have all of the education that like college students might have. Like it's hard for us to get experience in the medical field, but there are, and like kind of like, because obviously like I feel like if you want to get into medicine, you kind of want to make an impact in people's lives and stuff like that. But there are ways that you can do that even as a high schooler. You just have to be a little bit more creative with the ways that you do it. I guess like for example, right now, since like with like my passion for nutrition, one thing about me is that like I also sing, and one type of singing that I do like multiple different types. So like one type is Indian classical singing called Sangeetam. So you have like a passion like that, you can kind of connect your passion to maybe your passion in medicine, which is kind of what I tried to do. And like I just like I guess I can talk about it. Like I had like a little Sangeetam boot camp, and so I just taught 3 different beginners that didn't really know about Sangeetam about like how to sing the basics in just like 3 weeks. And I guess that and then after I went to a farmer's market, and we collected tips to donate to a nutritional like organization. And so that's like a really easy way that like an easy and creative way that you can kind of like create an impact on the world, like with your passions and kind of connecting your passions. And I think that it's like it was a great way for me to like spread Sangeetam to people, like to people that maybe didn't know about it and kind of want to learn, and also kind of like better like the nutrition in our world too, and kind of connecting 2 passions that I had.
So carry your passions forward with you. They can be seemingly oblique or not necessarily the primary thing. So your medicine, but bring in creativity, bring in the arts. And I was looking at your YouTube channel with your music, and I if you're okay, I'll put that link below. If you're good, I'll have that down below just so people can check out your creativity and the particular Indian style of singing. I don't remember, did you have some, I think you had some more pop videos on that one. Do you have also that style of music too?
Yeah, so I like when I tell you I sing like so many different types, like because it's like once you get into singing, it's kind of like you can just like expand however much you want because it's like all connected and it all helps. So
Right.
I do pop singing, like for like Western music, I do pop singing. I do classical like Western music. Recently I switched over to choir, so we've been doing a lot about that. And
Okay.
I do like Indian classical singing, and then I do like Indian pop singing too.
Okay. Okay. Years ago, I found Chinmay Sripada. Do you know her? Have you heard her before? She does a real high staccato. I don't know what octave she sings in, but oh my God, it's beautiful music. And the accompanying traditional Indian music in the background. She's just powerful. And then I recently found she's not a vocalist, she's a bassist, and she's badass. Her name's Mohini Day, I think is her name. Have you ever listened to her play? I'll send you guys the links. Mohini, I think it's DEY is her last name, and she's a bassist, and she's cool because it's fusion between jazz and almost proggy, rocky, but also with a lot of like playing traditional Indian instruments and so forth. So I can Chinmay is worth hearing. She does probably some Bollywood soundtrack singing and things like that, but she also has her own music that she does. And yeah, I found her about 15 years ago, and I just fell in love with the music. I was like, oh my God, it's so beautiful, because the voice is just very evocative. So so bringing that forward with you as you go through your career, and I think that'll help ground you and keep you sane when your brain is being bombarded with equations. And like Anne was saying, some of the literature, like in I'll go into NIH and Johns Hopkins articles sometimes because I'm obsessing over a health issue, and I start reading the literature, and the abstract you can get through, but then they go into the actual article, and it's like you got to get a separate tab open just to look at all the sciencey stuff, which I love. I just like, oh, a new word, Anyway, so Anne, if you want to do kind of like a summation or anything, whatever you want to add before we say goodbye to everyone.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, as Jaashvi was saying, I think a big part is definitely like, how can you make an impact as a high schooler? And I mean, as you see through Jaashvi, she's come up with so many creative ways. And I think that's the amazing thing about wanting to do med as a high schooler, because yes, it's hard to get internships, but that also encourages you to use your own outlet of creativity or your own driving passion, I guess, to uplift others, as Jaashvi is doing. Because honestly, you need to have a lot of self-motivation and love for others in order to go to med, as we were talking about. And if you're just, being handed internships of research, I feel like that doesn't display your love for med as much as it would when you go out and do a project like Jaashvi's doing, where she's going out teaching kids singing or collecting funds. Like, I think that's where you really show your love for med, because you're going out of your way to create something where you want to make an impact for people, rather than, just searching up like, oh, medical internships online. They're both important, right? But I think that's one aspect that you should really get into as a high schooler, because if you truly love med, I think the important part is that you really do want to help others as soon as possible, right? So whether it just be, doing small things like teaching kids lessons, or, just anything around med, even like just donating cards to hospitals. I know when I was the youth secretary in our church, we did a lot of outreach to like elderly homes or hospitals, where we would just make cards, go and sing, play instruments, and it's just such a good time. And like, there are just so many small ways to make impact that you wouldn't think of, but just go out and do those things. Like, everything counts. And yeah, again, I know I said this like 30 times in the beginning, but really, just as you're going through all your years of med school, undergrad, residency, I know it's hard to just kind of see clearly and be like, yeah, I can't wait to, go out and help all these people. You're kind of just thinking, oh my God, I have like 30 tests tomorrow or whatever it is, right? Yeah. But just, being more farsighted and thinking, okay, like, how is all of this I'm going to do help me become an even better doctor? Like, now when I go in and help patients, I'm not stressing over, oh, what like what is this? What is this? I forgot this concept. You have all that down. You can focus on helping the patient mentally more, even more than intellectually, because that intellectual part is already down and set in stone, So, yeah, just going into all your, tough years with that mindset, and also having, other passions like Jaashvi said. And I remember one time I was getting in an Uber, and I started having a conversation with the guy who was driving me, and he was asking me about what I wanted to do, because at the time I was headed there to do some bio project with my friend. And I was talking about how I wanted to do neuro, and he was telling me that he had a regular passenger who was also a neurosurgeon. And he was just talking about the ups and downs that he would see him constantly go through as an actual neurosurgeon, where there'll be days where he'll come back from the hospital and he's just raving on about, oh, I'm so happy I was able to save this patient. But there were other days, one specific day that was really bad. He was on his one day off, which is, really rare as a doctor, of course, but he was on his day off, and then he got an emergency call that one of his patients was about to die. So he got on an Uber, and the guy was driving him. And then halfway through the ride, he gets a call, and he gets informed that his patient has already died. And he asked the driver to pull into a parking lot, and he just like cried there for 30 minutes. And yeah, I guess what the driver was trying to tell me is just, it's like an emotional roller coaster on neuro, or on the profession itself, and you're just so emotionally connected with your patients. Because I remember at that time I was just complaining. I was like, I have so much work, like I can't do this anymore. Like it was like 7 p.m. and I was like going to somebody's house till 12 to do this project. So I was like really in a not a terrible mood, but I was kind of feeling down. And that kind of just helped me see like, wow, there's just so much to look to. It's not just all, like writing down equations, as you were saying. There's so much more to look into in the future, where we're going to be saving patients. We're going to be having those emotional connections with them. And it's easy to forget because we don't really experience that right now. But yeah, that's what it is.
Wow, both you just delivered very powerful statements. So thank you. I fumbled my way through asking you the question, but you guys kicked it really nicely. So thank you. Thank you for saving me. Well, you didn't save me, but you saved the conversation. So, so thank you guys so much for that. That's beautiful. And you two are amazing and wise women. And I see, a great future for you, or I'm going to aspire to see a great future for both of you. And if I'm still doing this in a few years and I can reach out and find you guys, maybe when you're midstream in med school, we'll wait till you get through pre-med and you're going into your post-grad work, and maybe we can connect in a few years and see where you guys are, and see, I don't think your perspectives are going to shift much, but maybe you can share, again, downstreaming this reality of what's going on. So you're at a certain tier right now, and so you're going to be moving up through multiple tiers and iterations of learning and discovery. And so, yeah, if we can connect in a few years, that would be really awesome. If I'm still doing this, I have no idea. But so if that can come together, that would be great. But in the meantime, I wish you guys Godspeed. I think you're going to both do really good work. And I'm a little more encouraged about the future. We were talking about AI earlier, and I'm like, but with good hearts and minds at work, like what you all are doing, and inspiring other people, you're passing this out mimetically or audio, however you want to say that, to a generation, to your generation. So thank you guys for that work, and to the YouTube audience, stay tuned. We'll see what these guys do. Subscribe to their podcast and go on the journey with them. And do you guys think you will keep that going through your into college? You think you keep trying to do it?
Yeah.
I can just see the show developing, right? All through the stages. That's kind of neat. It's an emergent thing. Yeah, it just keeps going through the iteration. All right, so thank you again. I very much appreciate it. I would like to have you back, but let's let some time go by so that you can bring back some stories and some anecdotes to share with your peers and those who are emerging. In enough time, there'll be, believe it or not, a generation underneath you guys coming up. So time goes by really quickly. So anyway, so thank you guys so much. I appreciate the conversation, and I hope you guys had a good conversation.
Yes, we did.
Yes,
Thank you so much.
Okay, good. Because I think we got some good information out there for everyone, not just for your peer group, but for people across the spectrum of age. To the YouTube audience, thank you guys so much for your attention, and I hope there was a good learning experience and informative and insightful exchange between the three of us, or the two gals and myself. And so I'll say goodbye to both of you once I stop the recording, but to the YouTube audience, thank you all so very much for being a part of this conversation. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
You.